But oh, sorry. I wanted to portray scenes in Celtic history with the idea that history is often mythological in mind as well. So I think I can show you the thought process behind one painting as an example. So one of the paintings in the show is called Boudica. And Boudica was a queen in what's now England. She was in a tribe called the Accompany tribe, which were living near modern day London. At the time of the Roman colonization of Britain. So her husband was the king of the tribe as well. He was murdered by Roman soldiers, and her and her daughters were abused by them. And she, in retaliation to this, started one of the greatest rebellions in England at the time against the Romans. She gathered up all the tribes in the surrounding area. And like Boudica's army as well actually committed fierce atrocities in England. They invaded Roman towns in England and basically just murdered everyone, and who knows what else. There's loads of Roman accounts that vary as to how gruesome it was. But they were defeated in the end, and Boudica committed suicide to avoid the Roman execution, probably. And that event was really important in Celtic history because it actually kind of signaled that led to the end of Celtic power on the island of Britain. At the same time, the Druids in Britain were all murdered by the Romans as well. And after that, England was basically Romanized. But I thought Boudica was a really interesting historical figure. So this statue was commissioned by Queen Victoria. You can see down the bottom. It was commissioned in 1883, but it wasn't put up until 1902, and it's beside Westminster in London. The thing was that Queen Victoria wanted a figurehead to represent Englishness or Britishness, something that she could be proud of. And Boudica was also kind of revived as a sort of feminist icon, because historically the Celts have always been famed for having both male and female leaders. But the funny thing is that, like, at the same time Queen Victoria was expanding British colonial rule, that was the height of the British Empire. So I found these kind of things funny. Like, well, also at the time, like, England was using the excuse that, like, the Scots, the Welsh, the Cornish, and the Irish are all Celtic, so therefore it's okay to colonize them because they're uncivilized people. But at the same time, she is using a Celtic queen as a symbol of Britishness. And you can also see, like, the statue is famous for being historically inaccurate. You can't see in the picture, but they actually have these big scythe blades coming out of the wheels of the chariot, which Celts didn't have. And I think, like, if you were to look at this statue without knowing the background, I don't think you would recognize it as a Celt. I think she looks more like a classical Greco-Roman statue, which I also think is interesting in terms of the way that the Celt is represented. I think the British Empire is kind of uncomfortable with the fact that Britain has such a strong Celtic heritage and doesn't know how to represent it. And you can also see these are some images that feed into that sort of idea as well. So on the left, you have Boudica gathering up the tribes, and that's from 1793, so that's 100 years earlier. But again, you can see that she's kind of represented as a Greco-Roman classical person, almost like the way the goddess Athena is represented in Greek mythology. And on the right hand side, you have the Punch cartoon, which was basically like a propaganda cartoon newspaper. And that's 1881. So that's at the same time that Victoria commissioned the Boudica statue. But you can see that it's almost a very similar figure to the Boudica. So this is now Britannia, this figure here. So Britain is represented as a sort of Greco-Roman woman. This woman that she's holding is Hibernia, so that's Ireland. So Ireland is represented as a peasant woman, and Britannia is protecting Hibernia from anarchy. And it's basically Ireland was also represented as kind of a Neanderthal man. So again, like Britain is representing itself as a classical nation, whereas Ireland is represented as Celtic and therefore barbaric and backwards. So this is my own Boudica. And the idea is that I could paint Boudica as a Celt. And what would that mean to paint her as Celtic? And I think the idea of the Celt as a barbarian is something that's been popping up over and over again, and I've been kind of embracing the idea or using it as a hook for the way that I would portray figures. So I'll just show you some of like the background symbolism and connections and the way that I actually approached making the painting. So here's some kind of imagery that relates to the picture. The two figures on the left are Sheila na Gigs, which are carvings that you find on early Irish Christian churches, usually in the Middle Ages. They're pretty much a mystery because those types of statues, basically they're all women with their legs spread. That image has never really shown up in the Celtic archaeological background. Like it's a strange statue in the sense that it just seems to have appeared in Ireland in the Christian period. So they're kind of these mysterious statues that no one really knows. Look, people say they have a pagan background, but no one really knows where they're coming from. And this figure here, the blue figure, is the Hindu goddess Kali. She's basically the bringer of destruction. She's the cosmic force of destruction. So I thought that was basically the basis for Boudica. I thought it'd be interesting to portray the Celtic woman as a stereotype that they're portrayed now. And this up here is the Turrow Stone in Galway. I just included it because, like, the idea of Sheila na Gig or Celtic woman is a conversation that's been going on since maybe the 70s in feminist art, especially. Like the fact that Sheila na Gig's kind of shock our modern sensibilities due to Christian oppression or the Western world. But like, if you look at ancient art in general, you have these figures. Like the Turrow Stone is basically just a big dick, or that's what people assume it is. We have these sexual statues or sexual artworks related to divinity or sacredness or religion in Ireland, both male and female, and all over the world before Christianity. So yeah, I don't know. I find it interesting. The work's almost like pointing back to a different time and different attitudes towards sex and spirituality. And then these as well. These two pictures up the top are by John White. I think they're from the 1500s, so a good bit before Victoria and all that. These are supposed to be illustrations of the Picts. The Picts are the possibly Celtic tribe in Scotland. And again, you have these are famous images of Celts, of Celtic warriors, and they're completely historically inaccurate. They're completely mythological. Like there's a few Roman accounts that the Celts used to paint themselves blue going into battle. But like you can see, John White has just gone crazy with the tattoos that he's given them. I don't think the Picts had tattoos like that, but those kind of images have completely permeated the way that we think about the Celt. Again, going back to the idea of the Celt as a kind of barbaric warrior. And I just included this down the bottom as well. This is a sword hilt from Donegal. And you can see in this painting, Boudica has the same sword hilt. So it was common in the Celtic world to have sword hilts that were in the shapes of humans. So I just included it because, like, I'm talking about how historical depictions of the Celt have been almost mythological or inaccurate. But I'm also feeding into that myself because, well, like I've been using, like, this is kind of vaguely historically accurate in the sense that, yeah, the Celts had humanoid sword hilts, and I've given Boudica one, but Boudica herself probably had a spear. So I think, yeah, my type of history paintings is embracing mythology and myth making and the surreal side of history as well. And I just included this. This is what they call a Janus figure, which are common motifs in Celtic sculpture, but they're actually in Roman sculpture and from sculpture from other cultures as well. But basically, it's just a motif of two faces looking in opposite directions. And this became a sort of a symbolic mascot for the show. Like the post-colonialism or decolonizing or being a post-colonial subject is obviously like an integral part of the work. But I found this kind of Janus figure was kind of gave me a formula to go about it, because the whole idea with post-colonialism is it's really easy to get into this kind of mindset where you're just saying, oh, like we've been oppressed, we've been colonized and by the big bad imperialist powers. But then you start to realize that it's not always that simple. And like Ireland is kind of a famous case in the world of post-colonialism for the fact that we have this kind of dual nature. Like there's it was Edward Said said that Ireland was like the twilight between the first and the third world. Like the fact that we've been a colonized nation, but we're also white Westerners. We have this kind of dual identity. And like, again, going back to say like British colonialism of Ireland, Britain itself has a very strong Celtic heritage. So yeah, the whole idea of like the two conflicting states or two pieces of information that don't really add up together coexisting became a central theme for the show in general. And I just kind of finish off with a bit of background as well. I thought I'd tell you about my Bealtaine and baptism. So last Bealtaine, which is 1st of May, it was in the middle of lockdown. I kind of forced my parents to rebaptize me as a Druid. I made this decision at Samhain, at Halloween, the previous Samhain, so I had 6 months to prepare for it. And I decided that at the time I was just Rónán O'Reilly painter, and I decided that, like, I was making this Vae Victis painting series, and I was trying to find a way to make art in the Western world as a Celt, and like using Celtic aesthetics. And I was trying to shift the focus. I always felt like, a Western, I was raised as a Western artist in college who just happened to have like a Celtic heritage buried underneath everything else. And that didn't really feel right anymore for this body of work, or my work in general. So I wanted a way to swap that around. I wanted to become Celtic, or a Celt who lives in the West, or bring the Celt from underground to the foreground. So a way to do that was to become a Druid. So my parents did this. They rebaptized me, both of them, and we decided that I wouldn't use my name Rónán O'Reilly anymore. So my new name is Rónán Raghallaigh, which is the Irish form. And I've been using that since now for a year. And that's allowed me there was a few different things going on there. One was to decolonize myself in some way, and then also to shift the focus of the artwork towards the more spiritual side, or to change the focus of the painting to ideas around channeling or shamanic practice. So this is the last slide, and it's just pictures from my Druid trance series, which I've been doing the last year since I had the baptism, which is where I've been doing these performances as a Druid, where I'll enter a trance through drumming or some other type of repeated activity. And the idea is that I can enter the Celtic other world, or the spirit world, have visions there, and then draw them straight away afterwards. And that's kind of been the main focus of my practice the last while, and it's fed into the Vae Victis paintings. And I did a performance in Platform on the opening night. The show, going back to the idea of the whole Janus two faces in opposite directions thing, the point of the show is that it would be a dual show on both sides of the Irish border. So it was in Dublin in September, and it was in Platform in January. So the performance of the exhibition was a two-part performance. In Dublin, I was facing the northern direction during the chant. I was doing a chant with the drum and then drawing. And then in Belfast, I was facing south. And now there's two drawings now from the Vae Victis show that are records of the trance. So that was the last slide. So I'm gonna stop sharing and maybe give it back to Lucy.
Thanks, Rónán. That was great. Really interesting to hear some of the kind of research that goes into it. I'm conscious that we don't have an awful lot of time, so I was just wondering if anybody has any questions. Nothing in the chat or anything.
I suppose I just have a quick question. It's Marie here. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Just wondering, you know, what brought you, what was your kind of, and I sorry I missed the kind of start of it. I couldn't get online with my internet, but I just wondered, like, what brought you to the place where you are now? Like, what was your kind of, what was the kind of road into this as something that drew you? You
know? There was no real. It's always been in the background. I've always been interested in Irish history and Celtic history. There's loads of little small things, like my dad's from Wicklow and he used to bring me to stone circles. That have been there for thousands of years when I was a teenager. So I think, yeah, it's always been in the background. And then, yeah, as I was saying, it always felt like it was in the background. And in the last 2 or 3 years, I decided to bring the Celtic historical side to the foreground instead.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I'd have a similar interest. I was just interested what, you know, brought you to where you're at, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I don't think there was one specific moment, you know. I think it's a load of little small things build up over time and going to different places. The place is very important. I think, like, visiting ancient sites has played a big part in it.
Yeah, I love them too. Yeah.
So there's one in the chat there from Petra saying, just wondering, with your paintings and the research, do you find you are planning your paintings, or is it more the case of absorbing the information and symbolism and then being quite intuitive in the quest for a more shamanic practice?
Yeah, they're kind of a mix of planning and intuition. Like in the case of the Boudica one, I just knew I wanted to paint her as a figure in this kind of Sheila na gig posture with a sword. And then as time went on, then I spent a bit of time with it and intuitively decide on different symbols that could go in the painting, or different decorations that can go, like, on the sword hilt, or yeah, I think it starts with a simple plan, and then the rest of it is intuitive. And the intuitive part is probably the most important part, because that's when the different symbolic narratives start showing up. Yeah, so I think I try to, the paintings are slowly going more into the realm of intuition and what would you call it, visionary or spiritual practice as time's going on. But I do usually have some sort of plan, because I found if I only work intuitively, it can get a bit stale, or it can get a bit stuck. So I think there has to be a marriage.
Great, that's a really good question, I think. So I might have to leave it there unless anyone has anything very urgently and quickly. But
I see less than a minute, is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So it'd have to be a very, very quick question. So I just want to thank everybody for coming, and thanks for Rónán for putting on a great show and a really great talk as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Night.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.